So I'm just going to jump into a very quick, hopefully that slide is coming up there. So I'm going to just jump into a very quick background, I suppose, really, very briefly, because I feel it'll help and give some clarity as to where I'm coming from with the topic of choice today. So my own background is very varied. I've worked with the small size, the medium size, and the large size, the multinational enterprises in various industries. And I suppose then in recent years, more so as a business owner, trainer, and coach. But no matter where or what position I had in my background, I was always involved in people development at some level. And so whether that be the early day executive role to the management role, people development was always part of my brain. Long before we ever had discussions around engagement or around employee experience, or perhaps even retention. So I guess that's really where my passion, my natural passion and my natural interest comes for this topic that I'm about to talk about. And it's also why our company, CMD Group, where we place a lot of emphasis with our own clients as well. So when this conversation first came up, and I know we've all been through a whirlwind in the last few months, but when the conversation started about the possible changes that COVID-19 would make to employment overall, I found myself asking that actual question, does it really make a difference? And that's certainly where the title actually came from. So I want to expand on that as I'm going through with you. But as I'm going through the slides, I'm also going to pose some questions for you yourselves. So hopefully it will give you a chance to let the questions ponder as such, or maybe give rise to some new way of thinking, or else it'll possibly reassure you that what you're doing right, certainly in the times of this crisis anyway. So yeah, for sure, our world has absolutely changed over the last number of months. What we all knew as our old normal has undoubtedly significantly changed, I would say, in many cases. And we're all certainly experiencing very strange, very new, very challenging times. But I'd like to think that we're all hopeful for a positive outcome as well. Certainly, I would like to hope that everybody would be safe from a personal level, and also that we can try and be successful from a professional level. But before I go too much into the actual title itself, I just wanted to start by saying, there are some positives of COVID out there at the same time. It will challenge our ways of doing business. They may never be the same way we've done them in the past. It's certainly going to challenge our thinking and our attitudes. It will change mindsets that we have. It's certainly going to change our plans, our strategies as we try to rebuild, because the plan we had even 6 months ago, perhaps, is nowhere near what it is right now. But also, I would like to think that it will create some opportunities that we possibly wouldn't have identified before. I know certainly for our company, it has created opportunity. There are changes happening, and I think one of the key areas that we have heard so much about would be the area of the remote working for employees. And I mean, certainly how many of us would have seen this coming down the line? I know we certainly didn't. But a lot of companies, no more than ourselves, just had to get on board with that. And COVID landed, and suddenly this option became reality. And I'm sure there are plenty of you here today as well on the talk who have employees working remotely, which you didn't plan for either. And yes, businesses are opening up, maybe not all of them straight away, and maybe employees will still actually have to work remotely. And it's not something that as a business all of us planned for, but it has been thrust upon us. So I think it's a case of sink or swim, or what we do in this situation. For us in CMD, we have a project team. We never really would have anticipated being able to work remotely purely by the nature of their project. But like many others, we had to get on board, we had to embrace it, and yeah, we had to make it happen as well. So I know that we can't presume in any way that we're going to go back to our old normal, but I don't think anybody on here today will presume that will happen, or suspect that will happen either. So when we're looking at the challenges of COVID-19 and spring, I want you to start thinking maybe about how can you manage this change and still achieve success.
Sorry,
albeit perhaps
sorry,
at
Brenda.
different success.
Sorry, Brenda, I'm cutting across you only because there's a lot of background noise. If I can remind
Yeah,
everybody to please mute themselves. I've tried to do it from my side, but for some reason it's not working.
I think
So
we've lost
please,
Brenda. Hope you haven't lost me.
no, I haven't lost you, no.
Okay. So we want to, so a lot of the slides, you'll see slides that go through with food for thought, and these are the kind of questions I want to raise so that you can ponder even when the talk is over. But how do we manage this change, and how do we still achieve success? You know, perhaps that success that we're now looking at is slightly different than it may have been, or perhaps it's still the same, but we have to approach it a different way. Are our managers, our leaders, our employees, are they trained and are they equipped with the necessary skills that they need to deal with this current situation also? So a couple of good questions to just start the thinking process. And, you know, of course, there's going to be a lot of effort. There's going to be a huge effort at the moment to try and fix things as such. But for me, it's important that we look at fixing things in the right manner. So if I use an example of a house is never going to survive if the foundations aren't right. So no matter what you do structurally above the foundation, what extra extension or room or whatever it is that you do, unless your foundation is right, then your house is not safe. And I think that's really where we need to place our focus in terms of employment. It's on the foundation of our employment. And you know, the quality of relationship that you actually have with your employees, that relationship between the employee and your organization, that's what's going to really be the best mark of resilience for you and for your success going forward. And people, I suppose, organizations who don't have that strong relationship with employees, I think they're going to struggle, and particularly in the tougher times. So how solid is your foundation then when we talk about employment? Is it strong enough to survive? And can you possibly add to it? To get started really at this point, I am posing the question, does COVID-19 really make a difference to our employment practices or initiatives? And my own answer is quite possibly no. And the reason for that is because I feel it shouldn't really make a difference, because shouldn't we already have been doing certain things anyway? Shouldn't we be building on it? So yes, we do have to adapt in certain areas, such as I've mentioned, the remote working. But shouldn't we already have been focusing on having our foundations of employment right anyway, regardless of COVID? Shouldn't we already be on top of the initiatives, on top of our plans, on top of our practices? And I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of organizations out there who are on top of it and who are carrying out good work. But I just feel that now more than ever, we need to build on that. And it shouldn't be a case of now scrambling to know what our foundation is and what makes a good foundation just because COVID has landed. So, you know, no matter what happens over the coming weeks or the coming months, whatever it may be, we really need to ensure that our current structure is strong enough to support the ongoing change that we're experiencing, any new changes that come our way, any possible new challenges that come our way, but also hopefully some of the new opportunity that might land on our doorstep also. So people often say to me then, well, where is the foundation? Where does that start? And quite simply, the foundation starts with your recruitment. It continues from your recruitment into your employee development, your employee engagement, and ultimately the retention of that employee. And they're the areas that I'm going to explore as we go through today. So for employment going forward, could we perhaps be making better decisions regarding our recruitment? Because we really should be ensuring that we are hiring the right fit to the role. So there are some key questions here really that I'd also like you to look at. And are there employees in your organizations right now who are not in the right fit for the role? It's a really important question. What can you do to assess that situation and find out? And do you have any type of plan in place around that? And as I explore the next few slides, you're going to see why that's really, really important. Because, you know, having the wrong people in the wrong role is really detrimental to the success of the business, the organization, whatever it would be. And really and truly after COVID, and if you have to recruit throughout COVID times, then we need to come back fighting a little bit harder than perhaps before. and making sure we have the right person in the right role at the very beginning is what's going to ensure that success. So, you know, your foundation, the reason that's so important, you have to remember that is the starting point of the employee within your organization. Okay, so getting it right for them at the start is getting it right for you also, because it's setting you up for success, but it's also setting your employee up for success. So I'd like to explore recruitment a little bit with you. And I'm going to ask you, do you hire for eligibility, suitability, or both? Now, many organizations focus a lot on eligibility factors, and they'll marry that together with an interview process. But suitability really is where we should all be focused in combination of the two I've mentioned as well. So if you take a look at the slide here, you'll see there's a 50-50% if we call it that way. So on the left-hand side, we have eligibility factors. So things like certification or qualifications, maybe their skills, their education, previous experience that they have. But in that set on the left, that gives us the ability to look at previous performance. And if we combine that with an interview, then yes, we get to question them in the interview stage about all of those. So it'll give us a fair idea of what the candidate is like. But if I take your attention to suitability factors, when we look at this, we look at things like their passion for the job, their interests that they hold, the type of work preferences that they have, and the interpersonal skills they possess. We look at their career expectations, because we don't just want people to join and go and join and go. That's the last thing. Can we provide career opportunities for them? We look at their behavioral competencies, but also we look at how they behave under stress. Now, if we're looking at those on the right-hand side, that gives us the ability to actually predict their future performance. So if we're assessing eligibility and suitability at the same time, we can now look at what their previous performance was, but combine it also by being able to predict their future performance. So eligibility is obvious. It is, you can see this from their qualifications, their CVs. You can ask about, have they visas, have they driving license, experience, whatever it may be. That is where you find out if the candidate can do the job. From a suitability point of view, however, you're finding out if the candidate will do the job and how they're going to do it or how they're going to fit. So from suitability assessment, we can actually see how they'll fit with the team, how they'll fit with the working environment and the organization culture, where do their key strengths lie, and also possibly their derailers, and what areas do we need to focus on straight away when we employ them, what areas do we focus on for their development. So there's a lot to think about in that, but I suppose from my own experience, I have worked with many organizations in the past who would have hired candidates based on how they look on paper and combined that with an interview process. But for me personally, I think people are getting very good at the interview process. They can be extremely professional and extremely slick with answers, etc. But for those particular clients, when I would have assessed them according to suitability, they're always blown away by what shows up as potential derailers with a particular candidate who possibly would have really come out on top in the interview process and because of their eligibility factors. So I don't know about you, but I've certainly had the occasion over the years where I would have interviewed and the person would have blown me away at interview, and 3 months later found myself wondering where the same person was gone, because the body was in the building, but there was certainly the rest had left, because what was said at interview certainly didn't shine through for us. So to take this a little step further, I want to talk about when we're talking about getting people, the right people into the right role, I refer to what we understand as the enjoyment performance theory. And for every single employee in your company, including yourselves, this is extremely important. So if I explain the diagram, it is very simple, and I'm going to do a brief explanation on it, because if I enjoy a task, I am likely to perform it. When I perform that task, I am likely to repeat it. If I'm going to repeat, then the tendency is that I will improve at it. When I improve at it, I will certainly receive good and positive feedback from that, which will then reinforce my enjoyment of that task. And so the cycle continues. And by research with Harrison, the research shows that if people enjoy at least 75% of their daily tasks, then they're 4 times more likely to succeed and have job satisfaction. So for me, it's very simple. Employees basically need to like their role and the work environment they're in, and they also need to enjoy the tasks that they perform on a daily basis. That's what makes them and your organization a success. So, you know, even as you're listening to this here, if you did a very quick thinking yourselves, where would you think that your employees fit into that 75% stat? Do you think that they could honestly say hand on heart that they enjoy at least 75% of their daily tasks? So it's a good question to start asking. So when selecting the right people in the role, of course, we have to look at eligibility. That goes without saying. But also, in line with that, we should also be looking at their areas of interest, their work preferences, what kind of an environment they like to work in and tend to be better in. What kind of behaviors do they display? What are their competencies, for example? And this is what's going to help us to predict the future performance of that individual. So the prediction is the word that's really, really key there. Now, if you think about it, if you can understand all of that about a person before they ever come into your company or ever start in your role, surely that's ensuring the right fit to role for you. That gives you a confidence that your recruitment is going in the right direction, etc. And we're also setting that individual up for success because, you know, individuals will always perform at a higher level if they enjoy the tasks that they're doing and their own interests are aligned to the position in some way. So as well as that, if their work preference, as I said, or their work environment preferences, if they correspond with the company culture as well, then there's a chance they're going to be more highly motivated. And quite simply, if our performance improves, then our likelihood to engage or desire to engage, of course, that increases as well. And then the cycle continues. So doesn't it really make sense to get this right at this point? So even if you think about it yourself as individuals, don't we always tend to engage in the activities that we actually enjoy ourselves? A, because we enjoy them quite simply, or because we know we can do them. So it's easier to do them because we know we're able to do them. But by the same accord, we tend to avoid the tasks that we don't like. And we tend to ask somebody else to do it, or we tend to just try and put it off and hope that they disappear. But by doing that, we're also not developing our skills within that area. Procrastination really, it can be really, really deadly for somebody's career, for their role, and indeed for a business as well. But I kind of think that maybe we just need to start understanding it a little bit better. Why do we actually procrastinate? And is it simply because we don't enjoy that particular task that we have? And then I would, urge the question, how many employees do not enjoy the tasks that they have to do in their daily role because they're not the right fit for that role? So how much time are they going to spend procrastinating? How much time are they going to be spending avoiding it? And that's purely because they're in the wrong role in the first place. But unfortunately, this is a real bottom line result or question or outcome or whatever it may be for our businesses. Some food for thought on that one. Do your employees currently fit into the category of the right fit for the role? So previously I asked you, did you know who was the wrong fit as such or not the right fit? Now I'd like to know if people actually can identify who's the right fit. How can you ensure that your current recruitment drive is able to answer this question? And can you produce data, for example, perhaps to back this up? So for current times, I'm going to expand on that just a little bit as well, because this is in regard to remote working, and remote working is really and truly not for everybody. It's not really a very simple thing for people to adjust to. Some people are lucky they can, others can't. But there are people going to want to find employment. People will want to get back to work. They want to get back to working as normal as they possibly can. And they've probably been, you know, rehearsing interview questions, looking at interview questions, answers, whatever it may be. But there's also a huge risk in employing here in terms of remote working, because I know for a fact from having switched into it and having seen the impact it had on our own team and how long it took for them to settle into it. I know that if I had to start recruiting during COVID, I would certainly be assessing for whether the person had, I suppose, the right competencies in order to carry that out. So have those candidates worked remotely before? Do they have the necessary skills and competencies to work remotely? And how are you going to go about finding out that answer? Because that answer to that question is really, really key. Like, as we all know, hiring and recruiting and replacing staff, it's a huge cost to any company. And really, in particular in these times, we really don't want to be making any mistakes. So I certainly would highly recommend any company or organization, assessing their employees as part of the application process. The data definitely speaks for itself when you do that, but also the results and the outcomes, they'll support the data that you have. So remember, a key point: without reasonable fit to the role, engagement it's highly unlikely no matter what you try. And I think, you know, I think that's a very simple slide, but it actually makes, it's a huge, powerful slide. At the same time, it makes a lot of sense. So the thought-provoking along the title of the talk today, the need to hire the right fit for the role has been here long before COVID-19 and will be here long after. So once we've employed the candidates, it's now up to us to engage them, but we really can't engage our employees if we don't truly understand motivation first and foremost. Now, I'm certainly not a motivation theorist or an expert, and I certainly don't claim to be, so I'm not going into a deep theory on motivation with you. However, the theory that I like to use is Hertzberg's hygiene motivation theory, and I use this with clients as a way to explain, and I feel it's very helpful really in today's new world. So as leaders or HR managers or business owners or recruitment managers, whatever our title may be, we ourselves must understand motivation and where it makes a significant difference to an employee within an organization. So Hertzberg delivers this very simply in his theory. So two-factor theory, and it states that there are certain factors in the workplace which cause job dissatisfaction. So over here on the left, you can see that they're called the hygiene factors, which are job dissatisfaction. There's a separate set which operate over here. They're the job satisfaction factors, and they're called the motivator factors. These all act independently of each other, and there's no correlation between them. So to explain that a little bit further, if you look here at job dissatisfaction, Hertzberg has stated the opposite of job dissatisfaction is quite simply no dissatisfaction. It does not automatically bring you into the category of satisfaction. And this point here is very key to understand in terms of motivation. What happens here, so these are kind of your basic terms and conditions over here, we'll say. And the poorer these hygiene factors are, the more job dissatisfaction somebody's going to have. So for example, if somebody feels they're on a low salary and they come and they talk to me and we do a deal, etc., that makes them happy, what am I doing there is I'm moving them into the neutral zone. I have taken away their dissatisfaction factor and I have moved them here into the neutral zone. What I now need to do is look at how do I now move them into the job satisfaction zone here on the right. The motivating factors are things like meaningful work, challenging work, recognition for their accomplishments, a feeling of achievement, increased responsibility, and opportunities for growth or the job itself. So it's very important to realize that in order to move somebody from dissatisfaction, I am really only solving the problem to get them back to the neutral zone where there will be no dissatisfaction with that employee. However, I now need to look at what are the factors I need to implement in order to now bring job satisfaction for that employee. So the ideal situation we're looking at is when we have cleared up the poor hygiene factors and we've brought the motivating factors into force. So now somebody can be performing at a higher level and a lot happier. Also, it's important that we eliminate the hygiene factors first, if there are any, because somebody can be motivated by a challenging job. They can be very happy that there's an opportunity for growth. So I have the motivating factors in play, but if that person's on a low salary on the hygiene side and is perhaps working in a dingy office, for example, no light, no air, no nothing, doesn't see anybody all day long, then those conditions are what's going to ruin that person's satisfaction within the workplace. Okay, so some food for thought. Can you identify with both of these factors, hygiene and motivation, within your own current organization currently? Because I think if people could start looking at the simplicity of this theory, I think it makes a lot of sense. Do you actually know this information about your employees? Do you know if they think that there are poor hygiene factors? Do you know how to correct that? And do you know what their motivating factors are? Because unless really and truly, unless we understand all of this and how important it is in the workplace, you can spend a lot of money on engagement initiatives, but you will not get the return from it because you don't really know why you're doing them in the first place. And I'm not too sure that anybody in that regard will have a return on investment. I've worked with many clients in the past who tell me all about their engagement and retention surveys, their engagement surveys. But again, my key message back to them is it's great that they're showing that initiative and it's great that they're taking the time to do those. But if they're not really understanding what's coming out of those surveys from an individual's point of view, then their outcomes are not going to be effective, not for them, but also not for the employee. So this is where I would like to talk a little bit, the need again for the motivation has always been here long before COVID-19, and it will be here long after. It's hugely, hugely important. And this is where I'd like to come in to start talking about engagement. So key to this is to look at some of the key challenges that we have in today's world. And I guess these have been here long before COVID as well. They're not anything new that has jumped up because of COVID, but very important to focus on them as well. So some of the challenges that are being experienced would be high employee turnover. So again, we're often brought in by companies to do some troubleshooting because they realize they've got a high employee turnover, but they don't understand why. Quite simply, sometimes there's a skills gap. And again, the wrong employee is in the wrong role, so the fit to the role is wrong. Sometimes they're recruiting quickly just to fill roles, so you're definitely not getting the right person into the right role at that point. They have a difficulty in retaining employees, possibly for the above points that are mentioned there. Performance feedback and efficient development. There's a lot of clients, a lot of companies we face say that yes, they have this in place, but they're guilty of actually not seeing it through. So they're not developing their employees. If you're not developing your employees, then really and truly they're wondering why they're even part of the team, why are they there? People are looking for development. Also, another key challenge would be the positive culture or the positive working environment. Again, this can only be sought if employees really feel that you're investing in them and you care enough to invest in them. And another one is the internal talent identification. I find that a lot of organizations or a lot of companies tend to forget to look inward to see what is the talent marketplace as such that they have themselves. Have they established a talent bank there which they can draw from? Or why are they always going outside to recruit externally? So as I say, these challenges didn't come with COVID. These challenges are here the whole time and have been beforehand. But perhaps with COVID, maybe they need a little bit more emphasis. Now, when we talk about engagement, there are numerous definitions out there, and everybody will like their own definition. For the purpose of this, I choose a very, very simple definition, and it's that it's the emotional commitment an employee has to your organization. If and that's the key word here, if you fulfill certain factors for them. So it's really important to focus on creating and maintaining a happy workforce, absolutely, but not just a workforce that's happy, but one that's engaged and motivated and, there to perform. Those, the engaged employees, they're the people who turn up with a passion. They've got a pep in their step. They actually feel a real connection to the company and where the company is going. And ultimately, some of those employees are the people who are going to drive the innovation within your company and help you in the challenging times like what we're finding ourselves in now. So some interesting questions to ask you all would be, when was the last time that your organization carried out an employee engagement assessment? To follow on from that, I would say, are you receiving individual responses and acting accordingly? Or do you receive individual responses and provide a majority solution? So the reason I ask that question is engagement is individual to everybody. It's not a one size fits all. So if you do a survey and you get a majority response looking for, and I'm going to use something so simplistic as a summer barbecue, then I'm going to tell you that while it's a nice to have, not everybody wants a summer barbecue to engage them in their workplace. Now, that's a very simplistic example I'm throwing out. Do you know if your employees care about your organization's future and about them being part of it? Because if they don't care enough about the organization's future, then they're not engaged with your organization and they don't have that emotional attachment to it. Do you know if they are happy and dedicated to their roles because they see the potential in helping your organization to expand? Because when you have employees working for you that you can answer yes to that question, then you're on the right road because you're now all working as a team heading the one direction. But above all, if you can't answer those questions, then how do you start to find out? How do you go about it? So for an employee to be really engaged, they have to be really motivated to work hard. And they will work towards the common goal if they know what the common goal is. And they'll certainly, they'll uphold the values of the company, they'll follow that vision, they'll be loyal, etc., etc. They'll be committed to your organization or your business. When I have people who come to me for coaching, for executive coaching, in my experience, the clients who have a high level of engagement with their organization or with the manager, they'll say things to me like, I'll hear them saying that yes, they do feel they get good direction on the work that they're carrying out, so they know why they're doing it. They feel that they get ongoing and supportive feedback, for example, on their performance. So again, they know that somebody's actually observing and watching what they're doing. They don't feel that they're coming to work just to be at work for a day, just to be another number. That's not what it's about. But they also feel that there's a mutual respect there. So if there is a mutual respect, they just feel that for them, their voice is heard as well. Okay, so, none of this is rocket science that I'm talking about here. It really isn't rocket science, but it's about the company and the employee coming together on the same path. That's really it. And, when you listen to those kind of comments of the people that come to me for coaching, isn't that what it's all about? Like, is that not what we all want? Are they not the things that we really want to hear our employees saying? Don't we all want to have a team of employees that can really get behind us and work with us, get the vision we're trying to explain, get where we're going to with the company, but we all muck in together and everybody feels valued. Everybody feels they have a part to play. Because I know for me, for our company, that's certainly the way I want things to be. So an interesting fact, however, I do want to share with you, and some are probably familiar with this already. According to the state of the global workforce, Gallup survey, and so Gallup are a company who always do surveys on the workforce, etc. 85% of employees worldwide are not engaged. Now, I just think, and every time I present this slide in training or in a talk, I think this is amazing, because that means that there's actually 15% worldwide who are really and truly committed to their work. They like to make a positive contribution. The remainder of the people, unfortunately, within that 85, they're not engaged, and some are actively disengaged. So basically, your non-engaged people really, they lack any kind of motivation. They're less likely to give you any discretionary effort. They will turn up, they will put in the time that's required. There certainly won't be a lot of energy or passion from them. There certainly won't be any extras, and there most certainly won't be any thinking outside the box, because it doesn't come into play. So typically they'll show up, they'll do the work with the minimum effort that is actually required. But isn't that an amazing figure, to think that we could possibly have 85% actually not engaged? And I often ask clients to really think about that figure and maybe take a look at your own organizations and companies as well then, and reflect and see, okay, what would our percentage actually be? Because I certainly would like to think it was lower than 85%. But you know, somewhere in that mix of 85%, we also have the employees, as I said, that are actively disengaged. Now, these people are totally unhappy. They're really not very productive. But unfortunately, they're also the people who have that tendency to, would say, spread the negativity, start the rumors, start the negativity, point out everything that's wrong, rather than try and find light at the end of the tunnel, shall we say. And they do that because it's a result of them being disengaged themselves. But you know, I think it's too big a figure. And I think it's really worth everybody pondering on that as well, on their own workplace, to see what they feel their own figure would be. But could we also ask the question, I think, then to go a little bit further and say, that percentage there that is actually non-engaged, is that potentially because they're in the wrong fit to the role from the very, very beginning? And this is where I'm tying it back to the foundation of employment again, because it goes back to the foundation, it goes back to recruitment. Is there a potential that some of these people are in the wrong fit? Now, again, we all experience different types of employees in our company, so I'm not kind of making a big excuse here. But if they're in the wrong fit to the role, where is their actual enjoyment performance theory? Because there's something not happening for them within that role. Okay? So really, really worth thinking about. And I suppose, you know, as leaders, as owners, as whatever our title again may be, it's just so important to focus on increasing employee engagement where we can. For the satisfaction of the employee, obviously, but also to safeguard our own sustainable growth in our business. Because at the end of the day, engagement, employee engagement, has a really very, very real impact on business and on our strategy. It should be part of our strategy moving forward. So when we talk about engagement, I have mentioned that yes, it is very individual. Engagement is individual to each employee within your company. The likelihood is that each person has different engagement factors. However, it is also a shared responsibility. By this, I mean that the employee and the employer have to find some form of an alignment, which A, is going to fulfill the expectations of the employee and thereby create a motivating factor for them, but also to allow them to play their part in achieving the goals of your business, your company, your organization. This is where you get the mutual needs being met. And if mutual needs can be met, then you're looking at mutual respect. And if we can reach that mutual respect, then we're also allowing our employees to feel valued by our organization. So a very quick example would be, you've got Mary and you've got Joe working in the same department, they're working at the same job, and they are both equally as good at what they do. However, if I boil down to an individual conversation, Mary would like flexible working hours and work-life balance, while Joe is progressive and he would like more development and he would like more challenges within his role because he would like to aim for promotion. So taking those two very simple examples, they have extremely different engagement factors. Without me having that conversation with them, I will never actually know that they are so different. Because if I continue to manage and just look at their output within the role, I see two very equal people. So that's where it really gets important that we look at the intrinsic factors to do with everybody, because that's what makes them really tick. So, you know, without even trying to understand motivation or engagement, we're never going to get to that point with our employees. And really, our insight into their expectations, I suppose, and their needs, what their preferences are, or what their behaviors are, that's extremely important for us. But it's extremely important for their individual engagement. So if you look at the diagram that I have on the slide, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we're talking about intrinsic factors here. So these are the employee motivations, their expectations, etc. And on this side, you'll see we have the extrinsic, which are all to do with the organizations and their expectations. If we can bring both of these together in a mutual effort, here's where we maximize on the engagement, discretionary effort from our employees, job satisfaction, retention of good employees, and ultimately the business results for ourselves. So, you know, if you all just reflect for a second and go back into previous roles that you've held, I'm sure we can all identify a particularly good manager that we had and a particularly poor manager that we've had. And ask yourself, what was really the difference between those two managers? Because whatever that difference is, whatever that poor manager wasn't doing, I can probably guarantee you they were not meeting your engagement factors in the way that they managed you. So it's a really worthwhile exercise to do. I've done it myself a few times, and I can really go back and pull out what one person did that the other person didn't. And you know, an interesting thing to point out too, for those of you who have middle line managers, etc., you can have two managers working in one department. One manager can be really, really good at motivating and engaging their staff, while a second manager can actually be pulling working relationships apart, where they have no understanding of what engages their team. You have two different teams who then go out into the public and are talking about your company or organization in two very different ways and building two very different reputations. And that all comes back to your manager's ability to engage. Okay, really, really worth thinking about there. But you know, now more than ever, because everything is changing so much as a result of COVID, I suppose employees really do want stability, and also companies are looking for commitment. And that's where we all really need to work together to try and find the alignment. So according to the State of Employee Engagement 2014 by Modern Survey, nothing will create higher levels of engagement throughout the organization, like candid conversations between managers and direct reports about what each employee wants and what engages them. Point that's really worth thinking about, because if we don't, again, I've said it a few times, but if we don't ask, if we don't talk, we will never know what engages each employee. So when we're looking at very quickly, what happens when we get engagement right? It increases the productivity because employees actually want to work. It will improve the organizational culture because your employees are happier. Employees' actions become dependable because they become accountable, because there's somebody who's holding them accountable, but doing it in a nice way. Trust and respect develops better working relationships. There will be less internal disputes because employees are actually happier and more content, so there's less to complain about. Environment of positive attitudes is hopefully created. So now you could have a positive environment of proactive thinking. Teams work better together for a common goal and success. So they're being challenged. There's a bit of a challenge there for them to work together. And the reputation of the organization is promoted by employees. Result. Because isn't that great for any organization where their employees walk out the door and can actually speak really positively about their organization? So you see, folks, employee engagement, it's much, much, much more than just knowing if somebody likes their job or not. Richard Branson one time quite easily said, train people well enough so that they can leave, but treat them well enough so that they don't want to. So as I've pointed a couple of times, the need for engagement has always been here, long before COVID-19, and it will be here long after. So to this point, we have actually looked at recruitment, and we've looked at motivation, and we've looked at engagement. And how do we now bring all of these dots as such together proficiently? Like, how do we deliver on this? And very, very briefly, I'm going to touch on emotional intelligence. And I say briefly because it is such a huge topic, a huge conversation, that you just wouldn't have time to do it justice here, but it is vitally important to every organization. So I've spoken about all the areas of the organization that your leaders or your managers or yourselves that you need to be proficient in. But the way in which we deliver all of this now is through emotional intelligence. Every single one of us, including our employees, have had different experiences with regards to COVID. We've had radically different experiences in some regards. Some people have been lonely, some people have been content, some people have got through it okay, some people have had anxiety. There's people living away from family, they're living away from friends, people have lost relatives and friends. You know, some of us here are lucky enough to have countryside to go for a walk in, while others are living in apartment blocks, etc., or crowded cities. But all employees are also wondering, how do they get back to normality? Where are the job prospects for them if they've been let go? Where are the career prospects for them? But they've all had different experiences as well. So, you know, as well as the employees who've loved working for you over the X number of years or whatever it might be, you may also find that certain employees will end up leaving because perhaps they're working remotely now. One of the reasons that can happen is because they never planned to work remotely for your company and they actually don't like it. It's not something that was in their preferences. It's not their work environment preference. So therefore, because it's not hitting their engagement factor, or that engagement factor for them has been removed, they may have to seek employment somewhere else. So COVID has thrown us up a little bit upside down in terms of that kind of area. But we need to really understand and identify with the experiences that our employees have had. You know, how sick were people? How afraid were they? As I said, did they lose family or friend? Because the times where we're living in right now, it's certainly not about intelligence, but it is certainly about humanity. However, in order to express our concerns, we have to be able to have a good level of emotional intelligence. We need to have some form of skills, certainly within this area. As the term has been said many times, I've heard it over the last few months, we haven't all been infected, but we have certainly all been affected by it. And now is the time to actually really get on board and unite with your employees. You do that through empathy, you do that through caring, you do it through understanding. You show them that you are there for them and that you do understand their circumstances, what they went through already and what they are currently going through. Because every one of us right now, we're all in uncharted waters and nobody wants to be there on their own. But emotional intelligence is about possessing the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, whilst also possessing the ability to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. This will help us certainly to drive success in the workplace. Now, if we don't understand ourselves, we cannot understand other people. If I don't know what my trigger points are at certain times, I cannot understand what trigger points are for any of my team because I just quite simply don't have that understanding. If we're going to know how to lead something else, we need to know how to lead ourselves first and foremost. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. This is where self-awareness comes in. So again, as I say, it's far too big a topic to really get into detail on it, but it's something that I urge everybody here today to really place focus on. Some food for thought. Are you yourself, your leaders, your managers, whoever it may be, are you all equipped with the essential and the necessary skills of emotional intelligence to actually help you to deal with your employees today and definitely going into the future? One really important question, because everything that I've talked about in the last couple of slides is what really affects the relationships going forward. Can you really, or your managers, can you really connect with your people, with your employees? Because you know, at the end of the day, emotional intelligence deficiencies don't show up on the balance sheet, but they certainly dramatically impact it. And that's by things like creating disharmony or poor communication, causing employee conflicts, damaging the culture that you've perhaps tried to build up, and therefore it'll make it more difficult to actually attract talent. Also, it's going to diminish employee engagement and, of course, hindering effective cooperation. Therefore, we're back down to decreasing productivity. So can you really afford for all of those things to happen in your organization, even now or even going forward? So what do our employees need from us? What do we need to give to our employees right now? And it's very simple. They really want to work for somebody that they know they can trust, someone that they actually believe cares about them as well as the bottom line. But one size does not fit all. So, check in with them. Check in with their mental health. How are they really doing? Just start a conversation with them and find out. But don't presume that you know how everybody is. Also, I suppose we need to be aware that making connections now more than before is possibly a little bit more difficult as well, because we are dealing perhaps with remote workers too. And those that are working remotely, there's a lot of things that has been removed for them. So they're possibly missing the office place, they're possibly missing the workplace, they're missing a certain structure and a certain discipline that they had when they were in the workplace. They're missing people that they worked with. Some are possibly even missing people that they didn't want to work with. They're missing the meetings that they thought would never stop or come to an end. But all of those things have been removed. So how much connecting have we done with our employees to check in, to make sure that they know that we care enough about them to make sure that they're all right? Because all people need to know is that somebody cares. Also, just a separate point would be to note that any managers, it's also kind of going to be very hard for them. It's more difficult for them because they're not getting the normal face-to-face cues they would usually get in an office environment. So they need to be given the proper skill set as well to deal with that, so that they can notice through a screen, really, because that's what it's all about these days, isn't it? We're all on screen. Well, you see, emotional intelligence, it has always been here long before COVID-19, and it will be here long after. But where it's now becoming more and more important is for organizations to be fully equipped, the necessary skills to manage remotely, as I said. An old phrase always springs to mind, that people will care about companies when companies care about people. So businesses all over, we're all currently responding to significant challenges that COVID-19 has undoubtedly brought with it. And we still have to continue to manage, and we still have to continue and plan. We have to plan for the ongoing disruption, any difficulties that still, I suppose, are going to come down the line at us. But the way in which we actually respond is going to be the key to maintaining the confidence of our employees, our customers, our stakeholders, whatever it may be, in going forward. And remember, whatever really you do today, what steps you take today is really going to help identify how you're going to thrive in the future months coming down the line at us. So I'm going to leave you on just a couple of slides on VUCA, which again, people have probably heard of or probably familiar with. And I guess in this most unusual world that we're all living in, thanks to COVID, it's something that perhaps everybody try and take note of from today's talk, because really our employee focus, our HR management, and perhaps our business management, whatever it may be, those functions have really never been more important than they are right now. So VUCA, quite simply, is an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. A combination of qualities that, taken together, characterize the nature of some difficult condition and situation, resulting in new ways of seeing and reacting. So volatility is where change is rapid and it's unpredictable. Uncertainty shows us that the present is unclear and the future is uncertain. In terms of complexity, we talk about different factors being involved here, which potentially cause chaos and confusion. And ambiguity is a lack of clarity of awareness about these situations. So I'm sure you'll all agree, COVID-19 certainly ticks all the boxes that I'm trying to explain there with VUCA. But I also think that this is where we should start to try and switch COVID-19, if we can, into a more positive outlook. And I do appreciate that everybody has their own difficulties in terms of COVID. But if we look at it from this way, if we can counteract volatility with vision, if we can accept and embrace this change that is actually happening, if we can still have a clear vision for the organization and for the employees, and if we can keep that bigger picture in mind at all times, then let's try and continue and work towards that. It gives us something solid to work towards. We can meet the uncertainty with some understanding. So we can actually listen to our employees. We can actually take feedback, request feedback, but really listen to it. Keep them updated at all times. You know, don't leave them in the dark. Don't tell them what's going on. Make sure everybody is informed. Communicate the whole time. You know, what are we doing now that we possibly could be doing different? And if we make those changes, how will they equip us for any other crisis that may come down the road, or any threats? Let's react to complexity with clarity. So do whatever it takes really to form clarity and create clarity and focus for everybody, and communicate this. Build really solid, good teams around you that will work effectively together in challenging times. And let's fight the ambiguity with agility. So adapt to the changes, develop yourself, develop your team, develop your managers, your employees, whoever it may be. Really build that trust and that confidence with them. Involve them. Ask for their opinion. Ask them to think outside the box. Maybe they have suggestions that nobody else has thought about. And if you are hiring, it might be a good idea to hire people who thrive on a VUCA environment. So I really hope that you enjoyed the talk today. But I suppose now the really important final question, COVID-19, does it really make a difference? So this time now, I think it's for you to ask that question of yourselves. Again, for me, the answer is still probably not, because I really believe that we should still be doing what we should have always been doing anyway, regardless of COVID. We really should be on top of our recruitment. We should be hiring right first time. We should be on top of developing and including our employees, really listening to them and really communicating with them. We should also be finding out what motivates them, because ultimately that's what's going to engage them in our organization and what's going to retain them. So, you know, COVID-19, please God, will soon be gone, or will be gone eventually. And when it is long gone, we are going to be operating out of another new normal, so to speak. But really and truly, our foundational factors should not have to change. So it's like the house. We can change that house as many times as we need to above the surface and make it look so different. But as long as that foundation is there, it will support any changes that we make. So the answer really to the question on the screen right now is what's really going to help you to decide on your next action step. So I'd really like to thank everybody again for logging on today, and it was great to see so many people interested in the topic, and I hope I've done it justice. So again, I'd like to thank Rural Enterprise Skillnet for inviting me along today. Thank you, Brenda, and for giving that opportunity. And I'm going to pass it back to yourself now.
Thanks very much, Brenda. As always, really enjoyed that, and I hope everybody that has participated has. And one thing that came to mind when the Richard Branson quote, which is one I've always enjoyed, was recently a relation of my own actually was given an interview around his own business, and his own quote that I now use is, train your employees to leave, but excite them to stay. And I just think that really says says a lot in those couple of words. And it's true, training is certainly not a one size fits all. And communication, without a doubt, is key to it all. And I'm conscious of the time, and I appreciate that people might need to drop off. And thank you to everybody for attending, and we'll keep you updated on any future conversations we're going to be having. But one thing, Brenda, that in the last while in conversations with a lot of the business community, that came up was about, you mentioned, and rightly so, the whole remote working situation. And look, that needs to be a much broader conversation yet. It's one that hasn't addressed a lot of issues that employers are going to have around the remote working, but that's a conversation for another day. But motivation was a big thing for them in keeping their staff motivated while remote working. Some are saying that their staff are just really anxious to get back into the workplace, because as much as remote working might be a fantastic initiative, on the flip side of that, it's very isolating. And there's a lot of people struggling with that. So just in relation to a quick comment around that, employers motivating their employees whilst remote working before they can get them back into the office environment.
Yeah, sure. Look, the first thing that springs to mind is the obvious support. And I know that a lot of people are doing this and trying to do this. And this is why I made the point that remote working, it really isn't for everybody. It doesn't tick the box for everybody. It's not as simple as sitting at home and being able to work from home, and it's great. So the support really, have they really got everything that they need in order to perform the job and be successful in it for you? But I really feel it's important we have to, as employers, we have to zone in on what is motivating them, what's going to motivate them at home, and what are their engagement factors. So if you don't have that conversation, we're not really sure how to even start with motivation. But right now in this current climate, it is all about them at the minute, because they fundamentally are the people that are doing the work to support us, to run our companies, etc. Communication is key. Don't just check in once a week or once every 2 weeks. It has to be clear communication. It has to be very straightforward, and it has to be frequent, but it has to keep them informed of where the company is going, what's happening right now. Don't leave them in the dark so they can make up their own estimates in their own heads, because those stories will grow legs in their own heads, and before they know it, the company is closing, when the company is probably already back on track. Understand that they are missing certain things from the office, certain things from the workplace. Find out, what are they missing? Because even virtually, we should be able to connect with our employees. If I give an example of my managers, when this all kicked off, I asked them to stay in touch initially every single day, individually, with every single person on their team. And that way, somebody knew there was somebody going to contact them every day for that chat. That's fine. Then eventually, as time went on and people got used to it, they kept back. But they did the daily contact. They kept in touch then as a group. They set up a weekly group meeting. So they still had their team meeting, and that was great. All done virtually, yes. But they also set up a separate kind of a coffee and chat forum where on Skype people could just log on as if they were gone for break within the workplace or within the office. They logged on, they had a cup of coffee, they sat back, they chatted. But in doing that, everybody found out who was having the same difficulty. So now they realize, I'm not the only one that's not coping with this. Because if they don't feel they can say they're not coping with remote working, they feel they're the only ones. They actually feel like they're failing at it. When in actual fact, there's probably 5 other on the team who are actually in the same boat as them. So things like that, a little bit of a social aspect as well, where we throw up positive affirmations every now and then, just something to brighten a day or to give a bit of news, whatever it might be. So while they can't be in the workplace, how do we make it as normal as possible and connected as much as we possibly can virtually to what they were used to before? And that way, everybody knows that their colleagues, their management team, their company, they still know that everybody cares, and ultimately that's what's required at the minute. Yeah,
that certainly is the way forward, and that's where I was coming from. Where I think there's such a push out there now to really embrace this remote working, that a lot of people are actually afraid to say, well, I don't like it.
Absolutely.
And, it's the same with that. We're finding that on our online training, where we're as a network, online training was not something we had embraced, because being a big believer in that social interaction and getting people into the room and getting them out of the working environment into the training environment, they're more likely to take on board what's being delivered and bring it back to the workplace. So I'm definitely finding through conversation that a lot of people they're kind of not enjoying remote working, but on the flip side of that, it's something that definitely there needs to be a broader conversation around. So that's where we're at with it. So guys, look, I'm conscious of the time, and we could talk for the rest of the afternoon if we were let away with it. So if anybody has anything they want to come back to me with on around this or around any training requirements that you may have, please contact me directly. We have gone into a lot of companies and smaller businesses right across the board, across different sectors, and put proposals to them on how they can embrace this engagement. And one thing that I will also just mention is that we have a Leading from Within, a program from women in leadership positions, and Brenda is the lead facilitator on that, and we've had huge success on that program. It's a combination of training and coaching for women who work with a team or have a team behind them, and maybe just need that little bit of help on their position and their career path. We have another, the next course is the end of July, which is fully booked. Our next one is in August. And again, there are things that, for those of you online that have a team and are women in the working environment, something that you could look at doing, and the success for people, what they're bringing back into the workplace has been brilliant. So look, contact us, let us know what your thoughts are. And again, a big thank you to Brenda and to CMD. Certainly all the trainings coming out have been hugely impactful, and we appreciate your experience.
Great to be part of it.
And back into it. So I'm going to wrap up, and if there was any comments that I need to get back to, I will do that. So again, thanks to everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Brenda. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.